Maid's daughter rescued a freezing lost child. The family reunion turned heads. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. In a sprawling mansion nestled on the outskirts of the city, a grand family reunion was taking place. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow over the expansive estate. Inside, crystal chandeliers sparkled, and the rich scent of gourmet food filled the air. The lavish dining table stretched for what seemed like miles, covered with the finest china and silverware, a scene of wealth and excess. Laughter echoed through the halls, but it was the kind of laughter that only the privileged could understand, the kind that made you feel invisible if you didn't belong. Among the guests, a young girl sat quietly in the corner, unnoticed by most. Her name was Emma, and she was the daughter of the family's maid. Dressed in an ill-fitting hand-me-down dress, Emma's presence seemed to blend into the background, as if she were part of the furniture. She wasn't meant to be seen. Her mother, the maid, had worked for the family for years, cleaning their mansion, preparing their meals, and doing whatever was asked of her. But Emma, despite being part of the household, was treated as an outsider. She was invisible in the eyes of the wealthy, ignored, and often ridiculed. Tonight, however, Emma's quiet existence was about to change. As the family gathered to discuss the latest business dealings and exchange casual pleasantries, a sharp cry broke through the noise. It was a sound of pure panic, and it came from outside. Emma's eyes darted toward the window, her heart racing as she saw a small figure stumbling through the snowstorm that had started to pick up. The child, no older than 5, was lost and shivering, barely able to stand in the freezing cold. The snow had already begun to pile up, and the temperature was quickly dropping. The sight of the child in distress sent a chill through Emma, but it also stirred something deeper within her, a sense of responsibility. Without thinking, she sprang to her feet and rushed toward the door, slipping past the laughing guests who didn't even notice her movement. The mansion's warmth was a stark contrast to the freezing air outside, but Emma didn't hesitate. She threw open the door and ran toward the lost child. The snow whipped against her face as she approached, but she focused only on the small, terrified figure in front of her. Emma wrapped her arms around the child, pulling her into the safety of the mansion. The child's face was pale, her lips blue from the cold, but she was alive. Emma whispered reassurances, holding her tightly as she guided her back inside, her heart pounding with each step. The warmth of the house enveloped them as they crossed the threshold, but Emma's thoughts were elsewhere. She had saved the child, but what would happen now? How would the family react? Would they finally notice her? And more importantly, would they finally see her worth? As Emma entered the warmth of the mansion with the freezing child in her arms, the first thing she noticed was the shocked silence. The laughter from the grand dining room had stopped, replaced by the hushed murmur of disbelief. The family members, who had been oblivious to her presence just moments before, now turned their eyes toward her. Their expressions varied from surprise to confusion, but none of them moved. Emma, still holding the child close, felt a sense of urgency. She couldn't just stand there. The child needed warmth and care. She rushed toward the nearest fireplace, gently laying the girl on the soft rug in front of the crackling fire. As she did, the child's chattering teeth and trembling body reminded her just how close to danger they had come. Emma quickly grabbed a thick blanket and wrapped it around the child, her heart still pounding from the adrenaline of her rescue. She glanced up, expecting the usual disapproving stare from the family, but instead, she found a scene she didn't quite expect. The patriarch of the family, Mr. Grant, had walked over from the table. His usual air of arrogance was gone, replaced by concern. His gaze softened as he observed the little girl shivering, and then he looked back at Emma. For a moment, their eyes locked. Emma could see a flicker of something in his eyes, something that wasn't contempt or dismissal. But she didn't have time to analyze it. The moment was fleeting. The child was still in danger of hypothermia. Someone call a doctor. Mr. Grant finally spoke, his voice cutting through the silence. But before anyone could react, Emma turned and spoke up, her voice steady but urgent. She needs warmth first. Get her some hot tea and dry clothes. The room seemed to pause. The family stood still, unsure of how to react. They were used to seeing their wealth and status as the ultimate power, yet here was Emma, the maid's daughter, giving commands in front of them. Mr. Grant was the first to recover. He nodded to one of the staff members and ordered them to fetch the tea and clothes. Emma was grateful for the help, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in that moment. The atmosphere in the room was shifting. The family members who had once looked down on her now seemed to be watching with a new kind of curiosity. Emma stayed by the child's side, not wanting to leave her alone. As the minutes passed, the child's breathing slowed, and the color began to return to her face. Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in what she had done. She had saved a life. But at the same time, she couldn't ignore the nagging thought at the back of her mind. Would they remember this? Would they finally see her? As the warmth spread through the room, the family slowly began to gather around. Mr. Grant, who had been watching Emma intently, cleared his throat and addressed the room. This is no small thing. The young girl was lost and on the verge of freezing. Emma, you did something no one else here would have. His words hung in the air. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had never heard him speak to her like this before. It was almost as if he was acknowledging her. The room grew quiet once again. For the first time that evening, Emma felt like she wasn't invisible. She wasn't just the maid's daughter. She was someone who had made a difference. The family members exchanged glances, some with uncertainty, others with a hint of admiration. But before Emma could process the situation any further, Mr. Grant's voice broke the silence again. Thank you, Emma. You may go now. It was a simple acknowledgement, but it meant more than any words he had ever spoken to her. Emma stood up, her heart still racing, but she felt something new, a sense of validation. She had proven that she was more than just a shadow in their world. She was someone capable of doing something extraordinary. As she turned to leave the room, she heard a soft voice from behind her. Emma. She stopped, her breath catching in her throat. It was the child, sitting up now, wrapped in a blanket and sipping on the tea that had been brought to her. Thank you for saving me. Emma smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. In that moment, it didn't matter what anyone else thought. She had done what was right, and that was all that mattered. As Emma stepped away from the child she had just rescued, a feeling of relief washed over her. The room was no longer filled with the cold silence that had gripped it moments before. Instead, there was a subtle hum of activity as the family slowly regained its composure. Yet, Emma could feel the tension in the air. She had done something no one had expected, and it was clear that the dynamics within the family were beginning to shift. Despite the brief acknowledgement from Mr. Grant, the patriarch of the family, Emma knew that one moment of heroism was not enough to erase the years of being treated as invisible. But something had changed, and for the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope. As she made her way toward the door, she overheard hushed conversations behind her. Some of the family members were talking about how incredible it was that Emma, the maid's daughter, had saved the child when no one else had even noticed her. A few even mentioned how they might never have thought of stepping outside in that freezing cold to help a stranger. The praise was unexpected, but Emma couldn't let herself get too caught up in it. She had learned long ago that praise from the family was fleeting, and one act of kindness wouldn't change how they viewed her in the long run. She had her duties to attend to. And this was just one moment in time. As Emma made her way out of the room, she passed by the kitchen, where her mother, the family's maid, was preparing more food. Her mother didn't notice Emma's arrival, lost in her own work. Emma stood there for a moment, watching her mother's steady movements, and then something caught her eye. There, in the corner of the kitchen, was a small envelope, half hidden behind a stack of plates. Without thinking, Emma reached out and grabbed it. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the familiar handwriting on the front. It was addressed to her mother, but it wasn't from anyone Emma recognized. Curiosity overtook her, and she quickly opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, written in a neat, professional hand. The words seemed to blur together at first, but as Emma focused, she realized what it said. The family was offering her mother a promotion, not just a raise, but a change in position, a higher rank within the household staff. The letter mentioned a special role that would involve more responsibility and oversight of the family's estates. It seemed too good to be true. Emma's heart raced as she read the letter again, and a thought began to form in her mind. This could change everything for her mother. For so long, Her mother had worked tirelessly for the family, enduring harsh words and long hours, always doing her best to stay invisible, just as Emma had been taught to do. But now, the family was offering her something different, something that suggested they might finally be acknowledging her value. Just as Emma was about to close the letter, she heard a voice behind her. "What do you have there, Emma?" It was Mr. Grant. She turned around quickly, her breath catching in her throat. He stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Emma thought he might reprimand her for reading something that wasn't meant for her eyes. But then, he did something unexpected. He took a step forward and, without saying a word, took the letter from her hands. He studied it briefly, then met her gaze. "Your mother has done well for this family," he said quietly. Emma was taken aback. Was this the same Mr. Grant who had treated her like a ghost all these years? Was this the same man who had turned a blind eye to her and her mother? But before she could respond, Mr. Grant's voice softened. "But don't think for a second that this changes anything for you, Emma." His words were like ice. "You are still a maid's daughter, and you always will be." The words stung, but Emma didn't let them show. She had been prepared for this. She had always known that the family's approval would be fleeting. She had always known that no matter what she did, she would always be beneath them. But as she stood there, looking at Mr. Grant, a feeling stirred within her. For the first time, she wasn't just going to let them control her destiny. She had saved a life. She had earned the respect of the family, even if they didn't acknowledge it fully. And as she walked away, the letter still clutched in her hand, Emma knew that this was just the beginning. No longer would she remain invisible. The following days were filled with a strange tension that Emma couldn't shake off. After the night she saved the child and received Mr. Grant's cold acknowledgement, she had expected things to go back to normal. But they didn't. The mansion seemed quieter, with a subtle shift in the air. People were looking at her differently now, some with a hint of respect, others with curiosity. It was as if they were all waiting to see what she would do next. Emma, however, kept her focus on one thing, her mother's future. The letter from the family, offering her mother a higher position, had consumed her thoughts. It was a chance for her mother to break free from the years of servitude. But Emma knew there was a catch. The family never offered anything without expecting something in return. Her mother would likely be expected to give up her dignity in exchange for a position of greater responsibility. And that was something Emma would not let happen. She had seen enough to know that the family's kindness was often just a mask for something darker. Emma decided to take matters into her own hands. She waited for the right moment, then made her way to the family's office. It was a room she had only been in once, when her mother had asked her to clean the desk. This time, however, she had no intention of cleaning. The letter in her hand felt heavy, as though it carried not only her mother's future, but also her own. She opened the door quietly, stepping into the lavishly decorated room. The scent of leather and polished wood filled the air. Behind the desk sat Mr. Grant, looking over papers, his face hard and unreadable. He didn't look up when she entered. "What do you want, Emma?" His voice was colder than she had ever heard it before. But Emma wasn't afraid. She had nothing to lose. "I want to talk about the letter," she said firmly, her eyes fixed on his. Mr. Grant finally looked up, his expression a mixture of surprise and annoyance. "You shouldn't be in here," he said, his tone sharp. But Emma didn't back down. "This is about my mother. She deserves more than just a promotion. She deserves respect. You can't just offer her a higher position and expect her to give up everything she believes in." Mr. Grant's gaze hardened. "You don't understand how things work here," he said, standing up from behind his desk. "Your mother is lucky to have this opportunity. She should be grateful." Emma stepped closer, her voice unwavering. "Grateful? For being controlled by your family? For being treated like a servant all her life? No, Mr. Grant, she deserves more. And I won't let you use her like this." There was a long pause as Mr. Grant studied her, his eyes narrowing. For a moment, Emma thought he might lash out, but instead, he sat back down, his demeanor shifting slightly. "What is it that you want, then?" he asked, his voice more calculating than before. Emma took a deep breath. "I want my mother to have a choice. I want her to be respected for who she is, not for what you want her to be. You owe her that much, at the very least." Mr. Grant's lips curled into a slight smirk. "You think you can change things? You think you can make demands of me?" Emma stood tall, despite the fear bubbling in her chest. "I think I've already changed things. I saved a life. And if you want to prove that you're different from the rest of your family, you'll give my mother the respect she deserves." There was a long silence between them, the tension thick in the air. Finally, Mr. Grant leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. "You're bold, Emma," he said, almost admiringly. "I'll give you that. But don't think for a second that your mother's position will be easy to come by. We don't just hand out favors. She will work for it, just like everyone else." Emma nodded, knowing this was not the end of the battle, but it was a step in the right direction. She had stood up to him, and for the first time, he had listened. As she left the office, her heart was heavy, but there was a spark of hope in her chest. She had made a stand for her mother, and no matter what happened next, she knew she had taken the first step toward changing their lives. In the days that followed, Emma felt a shift within the mansion. The tension that had once filled the air now felt slightly lighter, though the undercurrent of uncertainty remained. After her confrontation with Mr. Grant, nothing outwardly changed, but she could feel the subtle change in the way people spoke to her. It was as if they were beginning to see her for the first time. Yet, Emma remained cautious. She had seen how easily the family's admiration could turn to disdain, especially when it came to their own self-interests. The letter offering her mother a promotion still lay in her pocket, but Emma knew that the true test was yet to come. Her mother, though grateful for the opportunity, was hesitant. She had worked for this family for so long, and the idea of stepping into a new role was both exciting and terrifying. Emma could see the weariness in her mother's eyes, the weight of a lifetime of service that had yet to be truly appreciated. One evening, as they sat together in the small kitchen, Emma decided it was time to talk. "Mom, what do you think about the promotion?" she asked gently, her eyes searching her mother's face. Her mother hesitated, the quiet hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. "I don't know, Emma. It's a good offer, but there's always a price to pay with them. They're not offering this because they care about me. They're offering it because they want something in return. I've seen it before." Emma reached across the table, taking her mother's hand. "I know, Mom. But this time, it's different. They're acknowledging what you've done for them. You've given your life to this family. You deserve something more than just being invisible." Her mother sighed, squeezing Emma's hand. "I don't know if I can trust them, Emma. They've always treated us like we don't matter." Emma felt a pang in her chest. She understood her mother's fear. After all, their lives had been shaped by the family's power, by their ability to give and take without remorse. But Emma had seen something in Mr. Grant's eyes after her rescue of the child. Something that told her this time, maybe, just maybe, things could be different. "Mom," Emma said softly, "this is your chance to have a voice. You deserve respect, and I'll be here to make sure you don't lose yourself in the process." That night, Emma lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She had spoken to her mother, but the conversation wasn't over. They were both still standing at a crossroads, unsure of what to do next. The family's offer was a step forward, but the path ahead was unclear. What if they were still playing their games, pretending to change, only to pull the rug out from under them again? Emma couldn't let that happen. She knew her mother's strength, but she also knew how easy it was to be swallowed by the world of the wealthy, to be used and discarded when no longer convenient. The next morning, Emma made a decision. She would speak to Mr. Grant again. She needed to know if he truly intended to keep his word, if the family's offer came with strings attached. She couldn't allow her mother to be caught in another trap. It was time to take control of her own fate, to demand what she and her mother deserved. With renewed determination, Emma walked to Mr. Grant's office. She knocked on the door, her heart pounding, but her mind clear. When Mr. Grant looked up from his desk, his surprise was evident, but there was no dismissal this time. "Emma, what brings you here?" he asked, his tone neutral, but his eyes betraying a hint of curiosity. "I need to know if you're serious about the promotion," Emma said, standing firm. "My mother is not a tool for your family's gain. If you want her to take this position, she will not be treated like she has been in the past. There are no more games, Mr. Grant." For a moment, there was silence. Mr. Grant studied her, his gaze sharp. But instead of anger, there was something else, something Emma couldn't quite read. "You've got guts, Emma," he said finally, his voice low. "I can respect that. But you should know, your mother's position will come with expectations. If she accepts this role, she will have to prove herself in ways she hasn't before." Emma's pulse quickened, but she stood her ground. "She has already proven herself. She's worked harder than anyone in this house. Now, she deserves to be seen as an equal, not a servant. Mr. Grant leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. Very well. I'll make sure the terms are clear. But remember, this offer isn't just about your mother. It's about you too. Emma didn't fully understand what he meant, but she wasn't about to back down now. We'll take the offer, but only if you can keep your word. She turned and walked out of the office, feeling the weight of the decision she had just made. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Emma felt like she was no longer invisible. She was finally demanding the respect she and her mother deserved. The days that followed Emma's confrontation with Mr. Grant were filled with uncertainty, yet there was a sense of anticipation in the air. The family, for the first time in years, had treated Emma with a kind of caution, as though they weren't sure how to approach her. She had stepped into a role no one had ever expected her to occupy, and in some strange way, it seemed to unsettle the family more than it empowered her. But she was undeterred. Emma knew that this was just the beginning. Her mother's future, and possibly their own, rested on the choices they made now. Emma had not forgotten the letter Mr. Grant had handed her mother, nor the fact that there was still a lingering sense of distrust in the air. Though the offer seemed genuine, Emma knew better than to trust it completely. She had seen enough of the family's games to understand that one small misstep could mean losing everything they had fought for. The following week, her mother received the official paperwork confirming the promotion. The position wasn't just a simple increase in status. It came with a new level of responsibility, overseeing the operations of several estates and ensuring the family's needs were met with the utmost care. It was a rare opportunity for someone in her mother's position, and while she was grateful, Emma could sense her mother's hesitation. The weight of it all was heavy. Her mother had spent so many years in the shadows, and now, she was being asked to step into the light. It was terrifying. "Mom, this could be the change we've been waiting for," Emma said one evening as they sat in the dimly lit kitchen, the warm glow of the lamp casting soft shadows on the walls. Her mother looked at the papers in front of her, her hands trembling slightly. "I don't know, Emma. I've always been the one who cleans and serves. What if I'm not good enough for this? What if I fail?" Emma reached across the table, placing her hand over her mother's. "You're stronger than you think. You've been running this house for years without anyone giving you credit. This is your chance to finally take control. We've both earned it." Her mother sighed deeply, but there was a flicker of determination in her eyes. "I know you're right, but I won't do it unless I know I'm not just going to be used like before. I won't give up who I am." Emma nodded. "That's exactly why I'm here. To make sure they respect you. You won't lose yourself in this, Mom." It wasn't easy, but after a long conversation, her mother agreed to accept the position. She would take control of her future, no longer letting the family dictate her worth. It was a victory, but Emma knew they still had to walk a fine line. There was no turning back now. The next day, Emma and her mother met with Mr. Grant to finalize the details. The room was tense, as Mr. Grant handed over a new set of documents, outlining the terms of the promotion. His tone was professional, but there was something cold behind his words. "I trust your mother will meet the expectations of the role," he said, his eyes flickering to Emma. "She'll be working directly with me on a number of important projects." Emma stood by her mother's side, her jaw clenched. "We'll do our best," her mother replied, her voice steady but firm. The meeting ended without much more said. As they left the office, Emma felt a sense of unease settle in her chest. She had taken a stand, but the real challenge was yet to come. The promotion was just the first step. Emma had to make sure her mother didn't lose herself in the family's games, no matter how much they tried to manipulate her. But there was a small part of her that allowed herself to believe that this could be the turning point they had both been waiting for. After all, they had already defied the odds by standing up to the Grant family, and that alone was worth fighting for. The days following the meeting with Mr. Grant were filled with a mix of anticipation and caution. Emma could see the change in her mother, the small spark of hope growing in her eyes. She had accepted the promotion, and though it had been a difficult decision, it was a step toward something better. But Emma knew that this was only the beginning. Her mother was now part of the family's inner circle, but Emma was more determined than ever to make sure she wouldn't be consumed by their world. They had already taken control of their destiny by standing up to Mr. Grant, but Emma knew the true test was yet to come. As her mother stepped into her new role, Emma noticed the shift in how the other staff members treated her. They no longer saw her just as a servant. Instead, they began to show her a level of respect that had been absent for so long. But Emma couldn't help but feel the weight of the expectations that had now been placed on her mother's shoulders. She had seen how quickly the family's affection could turn cold, and she wasn't about to let her mother become a pawn in their game. One evening, as they sat down for dinner in their small quarters, Emma's mother looked at her with a weary expression. "Emma," she began softly, "I've been doing everything they've asked of me, but I can feel it. They want something more. I can't keep up with their demands forever." Emma reached across the table, taking her mother's hand. "You're doing great, Mom. But we need to be careful. They've always known how to manipulate people, and now that you're in a position of power, they'll try to use you." Her mother nodded, a heavy sigh escaping her lips. "I know. I've been working so hard to prove myself, but every time I think I'm making progress, there's more to do. It's never enough for them." Emma's heart ached for her mother. She had sacrificed so much to keep them both afloat, and now, the family was pushing her to the brink. But Emma wasn't about to let her mother become another casualty of their ruthless world. She had already proven that she was capable of standing up for what was right, and now it was time to make sure the Grant family knew they couldn't just take advantage of her mother. Emma decided to take matters into her own hands. The next day, after the family's dinner, she waited for the right moment. Mr. Grant was in his office, alone, going over papers. It was the perfect opportunity. She knocked on his door and stepped inside before he had a chance to respond. He looked up, his expression shifting from surprise to mild annoyance. "Emma," he said, his tone guarded. "What is it?" "I need to talk to you about my mother," Emma said, her voice steady but firm. "You've given her this promotion, but it's clear that it's not just about her work. You expect her to give more of herself to the family, to give up more of her time and dignity. I won't let that happen." Mr. Grant raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback by her directness. "You don't understand how this works, Emma," he said coldly. "Your mother has to prove herself. She has a responsibility now, and if she wants to keep her position, she'll have to meet the demands we set." "I know exactly how this works," Emma replied, her voice unwavering. "You use people until they're no longer useful to you, and then you discard them. But not this time. Not my mother." Mr. Grant's gaze hardened. "You're treading on dangerous ground, Emma. You're in no position to make demands of me." Emma didn't flinch. "You've underestimated me. My mother will not be used like the others. If she's going to be part of this family's world, she deserves to be treated with respect. You will give her that, or you'll answer to me." For a moment, there was silence. Mr. Grant seemed to be considering her words, his gaze cold and calculating. Then, with a slow, almost imperceptible nod, he spoke. "Fine. I'll make sure the terms are clear. But remember, Emma, if you push too hard, you may find yourself on the outside looking in." Emma met his gaze, her heart racing, but she refused to back down. "I'm not afraid of you, Mr. Grant. I'm protecting my family." As she left his office, Emma felt the weight of her words settle around her. This was a battle she couldn't afford to lose. She had made it clear that her mother was not just a pawn in their game. She was a person with dignity and worth. And as the days passed, Emma knew she would have to be vigilant. The Grant family may have given her mother the promotion, but Emma had made sure that the cost would be one they would never fully control. The weeks following Emma's confrontation with Mr. Grant were tense, yet there was a sense of quiet anticipation in the air. Her mother had taken the promotion, and although it came with more responsibility, the family's behavior toward her was changing. They no longer treated her like a mere servant. Instead, they acknowledged her contributions, even if it was a calculated gesture. Emma remained vigilant, knowing that the family's superficial kindness could easily turn into manipulation. She had seen it too many times before. Emma's eyes were constantly open to their actions, watching how her mother was being slowly drawn into the web of power and expectations. Mr. Grant had given her mother the promotion, but Emma knew the price would come soon enough. She refused to let her mother become entangled in their games. One evening, as Emma and her mother sat in the small quarters they had come to call home, Emma noticed the weariness in her mother's eyes. The excitement that had once lit up her face seemed to have faded, replaced by an exhaustion that had become all too familiar. Emma knew her mother well enough to understand what was happening. The responsibilities of the new position were taking their toll. "Mom, you don't have to do everything for them," Emma said gently, reaching for her mother's hand. You've worked so hard to get here, but you can't let them drain you. Her mother looked at her, her eyes tired but full of understanding. I want to make sure I do well, Emma. They're giving me this chance, and I can't afford to mess it up. But sometimes, I wonder if they really care or if they just want to control me more. Emma's heart ached for her mother. The family had offered her a promotion, but it was clear that it was a double-edged sword. They wanted her to do more, give more, without ever truly acknowledging the price she had already paid. Emma could see the fear in her mother's eyes, the fear that this new position would be a trap, a way to keep her under the family's control forever. I won't let them use you, Mom, Emma said firmly. You deserve respect, and I'll make sure they understand that. The next day, Emma made another decision. She knew that the only way to protect her mother was to keep pushing back against the family's control. She couldn't let them dictate her mother's worth. Emma had already proven herself capable of standing up to Mr. Grant, and now she would do it again. She walked to Mr. Grant's office, determined to make her stance clear. She knocked on the door and entered without waiting for a response. Mr. Grant looked up, his expression unreadable. Emma, he said, his voice cool. What brings you here this time? Emma took a deep breath and stood her ground. I need to know if you're truly respecting my mother's position or if this is just another way for you to control her. Mr. Grant's gaze sharpened, but Emma didn't flinch. Your family has always treated her like a servant, and now you want her to take on even more responsibility. But will you give her the respect she deserves? For a moment, there was silence. Mr. Grant seemed to weigh her words, but his expression didn't soften. Your mother knew what she was getting into when she took the promotion, he said, his tone guarded. She knows the expectations, and if she can't meet them, then she'll have to step aside. Emma's heart tightened. She could feel the subtle threat behind his words, the reminder that her mother's worth was always at the mercy of the family's whims. I won't let you treat her like that, Emma said, her voice unwavering. She's not a pawn in your game. You'll respect her or face the consequences. Mr. Grant's eyes narrowed, but Emma didn't back down. She had already made it clear that she wasn't afraid to stand up to him. You're bold, Emma, he said, almost begrudgingly. I'll make sure your mother is treated fairly. But don't mistake this for weakness. I won't tolerate any more challenges from you. Emma held his gaze, her resolve firm. You're not the one who gets to decide what's acceptable anymore. As she left his office, Emma felt a surge of determination. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was no longer afraid. She had taken a stand for her mother, and now, she was ready to protect her at all costs. The Grant family might have power, but Emma knew that they couldn't control her mother or her anymore. The days following Emma's final confrontation with Mr. Grant were filled with a sense of cautious optimism. Her mother had stepped into her new role with a renewed sense of purpose, but Emma knew the real challenge was just beginning. She had stood up to the Grant family before, but now it was time to prove that her mother's respect wasn't just a fleeting gesture. It was something that would be sustained, no matter what. The mansion, once an imposing symbol of wealth and power, now felt more like a battleground to Emma. She watched her mother carefully, ensuring that the newfound respect she had earned wasn't just an illusion. Her mother was navigating the treacherous waters of the family's demands, and Emma could see the strain it was putting on her. Yet, through it all, there was a quiet strength in her mother's eyes. She was no longer the woman who had quietly served in the shadows. She was now a woman with a voice, with power, and Emma was determined to help her hold on to it. One evening, as the two of them sat together in the small kitchen, Emma looked at her mother with a sense of pride. Mom, you've done it. You've proven you can stand on your own. Her mother smiled, though there was a hint of fatigue in her eyes. It's not easy, Emma, but I'm not going to let them push me around anymore. I'm doing this for you, for us. Emma's heart swelled with love for her mother. You've always done everything for me. But now, it's time for you to live for yourself too. A few weeks later, the Grant family held a grand gathering at the mansion to celebrate some of their latest business deals. It was a lavish affair, full of the usual displays of wealth and power. Emma's mother was there, in her new role, standing alongside the family members as an equal. No longer relegated to the background, she was a part of the conversation, her opinions respected. As the night wore on, Emma watched her mother, and for the first time, she truly saw the strength in her. She wasn't just a servant or a pawn in the Grant family's games anymore. She was a woman who had fought for her place, and she had earned it. Emma's eyes met Mr. Grant's across the room. He was watching her mother with a look of approval, but Emma knew better than to trust his approval. She had fought too hard for her mother's dignity to let it be stripped away again. The evening came to an end, and Emma and her mother made their way back to the quiet of their quarters. As they sat together, Emma couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. They had been through so much, and yet, they had emerged stronger than ever. "We did it, Mom," Emma said softly, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. Her mother nodded, her eyes filled with quiet pride. "We did, Emma, and no one can take that away from us." The Grant family might have given her mother the promotion, but Emma knew that it was they who had changed. They had underestimated the strength of a woman who had been treated as invisible for so long. Now, her mother was a force to be reckoned with, and Emma, standing beside her, knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. This was just the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, a chapter where they were no longer bound by the expectations of others, but free to write their own story.